When you think of feminism, what comes to mind? Probably something like that, right? Well, this is what feminism really is. Feminism is often misunderstood and dismissed in our society. It has a negative connotation, and many people either won't call themselves feminists or fear to be associated with the label or movement in any way. So, what exactly is feminism? In short, feminism is about creating a society that is equal for everyone, regardless of their gender. Society often prioritizes the male point of view, and women and others not on the traditional gender spectrum are treated unjustly in these societies as a result. Efforts to change this include fighting against gender stereotypes and establishing opportunities and outcomes for women that are equal to those of men. Feminism aims to address inequalities and inequities that often span class, gender, race, and sex, as well as many others. Feminism has advocated for women to have the right to vote, hold public office, work, earn equal pay, own property, receive education, enter contracts, have equal rights within marriage, and more. Feminists have also worked to ensure access to contraception and to protect women from sexual assault, harassment, and domestic violence. As feminism has progressed, it has had to adapt to each time period with its unique challenges. Each wave of feminism has left its own unique mark on the feminist movement. Let's have a look at each one now. First wave feminism. The first wave of feminism began with the women's suffrage movements in the 19th and early 20th centuries, with the goal of getting women the right to vote. The first wave largely revolved around gaining basic legal rights for women. At this point in history, women were deemed the property of men, and if you were an unmarried woman, you were seen as the property of your father, and once you married, you became the property of your husband. Women didn't have the ability to file for divorce and couldn't even be granted custody of their own children. Women who did work outside of the home usually held low positions and worked largely in factories managed and controlled by men. Women also had no right to vote in elections, with their husbands or fathers expected to vote in their interests. Calling them second-class citizens would be a massive understatement. Whilst the first wave of feminism made many strides for women's rights, it was not without inequality. Women of colour faced discrimination based on both race and gender. Caucasian feminists claimed that their education and political awareness would make them good voters and allow them to make informed decisions. Women of colour, on the other hand, who didn't have access to similar education as a result of further inequality, could not stand behind such a statement, and as a result became even more marginalised by the movement. It was not until the second wave that the need for equality was extended to other women in the feminist movement. Second wave feminism. The second wave began in the 1960s and campaigned for legal and social equality for women. Following the Second World War, women were expected to return to their roles as housewives. The men that had to leave the workforce to join the defense forces had returned, and women were fired from their positions in order to give men jobs. Women were expected to quietly resume their lives as loyal housewives. The issues that were at the heart of the second wave were issues relating to sexual assault, reproductive rights, domestic violence, and workplace safety rights. There was a widespread effort to reform the negative and inferior image of women in popular culture to a more positive and realistic one. Women created their own popular culture, and the movement spread through feminist films, music, and books. Marital rape was outlawed and no-fault divorce was introduced, which greatly reduced the dependence of wives on their husbands. As a whole, the second wave was characterized by solidarity among women fighting for equality. With the growing feminist movement, there were new types of feminism that were created as feminists started to diverge in their thinking. Radical feminism wanted to challenge and dismantle all gender roles and address the patriarchal roots that were causing inequality between people of all genders. Socialist feminism acknowledged the oppressive nature of a capitalist society and saw a connection between gender and racial discrimination. It differed from radical feminism as it didn't see gender as the exclusive basis for all oppression. Ecofeminism saw a connection between environmental justice and care with women's rights and liberation. While the second wave was a hugely successful movement that had many legal and cultural victories leading to greater equality, prominent feminists were typically white, middle-class women, who wrote feminist theory centered around their own experiences and troubles. While there were a diverse group of feminists from all communities of the movement, they felt excluded from the narrative. It was viewed as unwise to discuss gender equality without taking into consideration racial inequality too. Frustrated by a feminism movement that didn't encompass all women, this motivated women of colour to form their own organisations, to represent their interests in the movement. While the second wave broadened the scope of the feminist cause, it had flaws and failures. The third wave worked to address these issues that had arisen around diversity. Third wave feminism. Beginning in the 1990s, the third wave focused on individuality and diversity. The third wave of feminism began in a generation that had grown up with feminism and as such had taken the hard-earned accomplishments of the first and second waves for granted. The third wave primarily tried to bring in communities that were previously left out of feminism and recognize the interconnected nature of oppression. The focus was on race and gender and grew out of the sex-positive debates of the second wave. The third wave of feminism was also greatly focused on reproductive rights for women. Feminists advocated for women's right to make their own choices about their body and stated that it was a basic right to have access to birth control and abortion. The third wave spread further into pop culture and media and put an emphasis on the voices of young feminists. Third wave feminists reclaimed terms that were previously used to oppress or label women by the patriarchy and used them as tools of liberation. The rights of transgender people were not included in feminism until very recently, and have remained a focal point from the third wave to today. Ignorance among large sections of society about the identity of trans persons continues to remain a significant issue, but the third wave was important in taking the first steps towards educating others. Its effect on societal perceptions and expectations from women was crucial in bringing them closer to equality in more spheres than ever before. Fourth wave feminism. The fourth wave began around 2012 and seeks greater gender equality by focusing on fighting gendered norms and the marginalization of women in society. It encourages women to speak up and share their experiences online about sexual abuse, harassment, and violence. Social media has played a key role in the fourth wave as it has offered women the opportunity to speak freely and allow their voices to be heard. The fourth wave emphasizes intersectionality, the interlocking systems of power, and how these contribute to the social inequality of already marginalized groups. Fourth wave feminists have also argued that reinforced gender stereotypes for everyone in society can cause gender discrimination in the workplace and society as a whole. The future of feminism. While women's rights have drastically improved over recent decades, there is still a threat that these rights could be reversed or taken away altogether. Just look at issues related to reproductive choice, access to basic education, and freedom of movement as some examples of this. A recent example of this is the US Supreme Court's decision to reverse Roe v. Wade, ending abortion rights for millions. Feminism has the capacity to free all people from the restrictive codes and gender norms that continue to hold them back. We all need to consider how we can play an active part in promoting change. Fundamentally, this involves examining our own motivations and assumptions. The fight for equality is far from over. Here's one final thought for you to consider. The United Nations estimates that it will take 80 years to achieve gender equality. Just let that sink in. 80 years. There won't be gender equality until the year 2102 at the very least. Thanks for watching.